it just grows so tiresome. It just grows so tiresome, doesn't it? Let's just get right into this because, quite frankly, obviously, Tuesday was a massive success. Big numbers, huge numbers, some of the biggest we've ever seen. But if Republicans and conservatives want to actually replicate that, right, something as miraculous as flipping deep blue Virginia, it's actually going to be important to understand why we won on Tuesday in Virginia. And it's very clear that the establishment Republican Party, all of these PACs, all of these political consultants, whatnot, still don't get it because you're still getting this type of messaging from the GOP. Reading right from the official GOP Twitter account. Last night, Tuesday night, made it abundantly clear Americans choose freedom and reject socialism. Oh, really? Is that what it was about? Really, is socialism, quote unquote, what the Glenn Youngkin election was about? Let me ask you this question, if that were the case. If that were the case, let's do a deep dive. How many times did you hear Glenn Youngkin call his opponent a quote unquote socialist? Yeah, not many. I don't even know if he said it once, but it certainly was not kind of the focal center point of his campaign, was it? Okay? How many times did you really, I don't even know much about that campaign, but how many times did you hear Jack in New Jersey say that word? Is that what these largely successful Republican candidates were successful on running against by repeating the same tired old 2018, establishment think tank organization line of, well, the Democrats are the socialists. You want to do a healthcare social? No. Let's actually be extremely precisely clear about why. Specifically, let's just focus in on Glenn Youngkin because he won, right? And he won really a state that he was not supposed to, obviously. It's Virginia. Why Glenn Youngkin actually won on Tuesday. And let me say, it was not because he ran against this supposed boogeyman of socialism. Of factors he could control, and we're going to talk about the factors he could not control in a second and explain why even on those, the establishment GOP just doesn't get it. And I'm just trying to help. Okay, I'm just trying to help. But anyways, the reason why Glenn Youngkin won specifically is because he inserted himself into the culture wars, okay? And that is precisely when you started to see Glenn Youngkin surge, when he started to make a big deal out of the culture wars, specifically anti-white CRT, gender theory, the sexual assault stuff happening in, the Loudoun County School Board, and all, and, combined sort of in a larger sense, just all of the issues with left-wing control over the education system. That is what Glenn Youngkin really ran against, and we all know, everyone understands, that coalition specifically of parents is what pushed him over the finish line, okay? Now, why is it that the establishment GOP wants to take that victory, which we all know the center point, the focal point of his campaign, the reason he won precisely was because of this CRT stuff. Why is it that the Republican Party wants to take that and transform it into this talking point about socialism, quote unquote? You know what? I will say in a very high IQ sense, the Republican Party is right, okay? And by the way, this is not what they mean. This is not what they're trying to get at. But in a very high IQ sense, I will admit it is true that, things like critical race theory, critical theory in general, gender theory, what have you, all of these things do have Marxist roots and Marxist goals and were written by Marxists. I will say that. That certainly is true. And it is true, just to give credit to the kind of the counterpoint here, it is certainly true that the end goal of what they are doing with cultural Marxism is the destruction of tradition, the destruction of traditional and natural hierarchies, right? Bring down the whole system, bring down all of the hierarchies and power structures in that society down so that we can establish, right, this false god of equality. I will say that there is truth to that, but that's not what the GOP means when they say socialism, is it? No, what the GOP means is, healthcare, so that's socialist, high taxes, social. Okay, this just cringe, overused, annoying talking point, and that is not why Glenn Youngkin won his election. Okay? Did he campaign? Sure, on lowering taxes or whatever? Of course he did. Of course that's going to be a focal point of any Republican campaign. I'm not against lowering taxes, by the way. People seem to think that because I don't think that marginal tax cuts are, the most important political issue facing our country, that I somehow am against the concept of lowering taxes. No, I'm not. I do think Republicans should run off of tax cuts, but it's a simple fact of the matter that if tax cuts are really what won Republicans' election, elections, all you have to do is get up there and say, we're going to cut your taxes. Republicans would win every single election. We would have never lost Virginia. We would have never lost any of these elections because every Republican campaigns on lowering taxes. But clearly what you are seeing specifically is the fact that while, lowering taxes is not a bad thing, it is certainly something you should campaign on. There are a lot of Americans who are sick of the taxes. It is not what in a competitive election, like a seriously difficult election, simply saying you are going to lower taxes is not going to be enough. Okay, it is not going to be enough. And simply saying your opponents are socialists because they don't want to lower taxes also is not going to be enough. What we are increasingly finding is the fact that the most successful Republican candidates are successful because of the fact that they insert themselves into a particular culture war. Okay, and quite frankly, it is these culture wars. Things like hatred for white people being taught in the school systems, what have you. It is these types of culture wars that ultimately really do mobilize anger and mobilize coalitions and really inspire people to really care about something and want to vote for you, okay? And let's be clear about that. If Republicans want to truly be successful, they cannot do what these political consultants and the establishment Republican Party wants them to do, which is basically, and by the way, what the Heritage Foundation and all of these think tanks seem to want them to do, which is just simply run on lower taxes, stay out of, kind of hotbed cultural issues, whatnot. And, and that's, I think, listen, part of it is that the fact that if you call your opponent socialist and you only talk about taxes and what have you, guess what else? You're not going to be called a racist. Maybe that's what it's really about, right? But obviously, if you insert yourself into discussions of race theory and race relations and things like that, obviously your opponents are going to call you a racist. And that's what they're scared of, right? And they're probably, in many ways, they're simply controlled opposition and what have you. But that's all to say. Again, the most successful Republican candidates are successful not because they avoid the culture wars, but because they insert themselves into the culture wars. Quite often, they are the most controversial culture wars, okay? This issue of race, especially after Black Lives Matter and whatnot, this is something that's controversial actually to insert yourself into, okay? Don't forget that before we deemed it critical race theory and eventually just anti-white hatred, it was called racial sensitivity training. You take a look at Glenn Youngkin. How did this guy win his election? Well, let me just say, he did not win his election by doing what the Trump campaign and the Republican Party tried to do in 2020, which was just try to pander to minorities through like cringe social justice politics. Glenn Youngkin did not run off of criminal justice reform or, any of this stuff. What he actually did, and the reason he won the election was double down and actually, and comparatively speaking for Deep Blue Virginia, I guess this is something that you would actually consider to be pretty bold, actually doubled down and took a pretty hard stance, all things considered, considering the state he was running in, on critical race theory and things like this. And guess what? You see the reaction before and after. He was ruthlessly slandered, obviously, as you would expect, as being a racist, right? And, obviously you have, media and stuff calling his voters racist and whatnot. Obviously that's going to happen. But guess what? He won the election. That's all that matters. Now he has the power. Hopefully he uses it. But that's all to say, clearly it is the case that you will get called these names, okay? Racist, culture warrior, whatever it is. Clearly, again, anytime you actually act as a culture warrior, anytime you actually insert yourself into the culture wars, the left obviously gets the most mad at you. The left will, obviously slander you much harder than if you're simply trying to run on lower taxes. But do you know the reason why that is? Because again, Republicans clearly are scared of this confrontation. The reason why they get the most mad when you insert yourself into the culture wars is because inserting yourself into the culture wars actually works. It is actually effective. Okay, that's why they are the most offensive when you get into it. And so that's all to say, again, Republicans win when they insert themselves into culture wars. That's why the left doesn't want you to insert yourselves into them. Okay, is that clear? Because clearly, they're really not that scared of you calling them a socialist, but, you actually kind of come after not necessarily the economic policies, which are reversible, but really these social policies that are irreversible. It's when you start coming after those that the left starts to get really mad. You take a look at the most kind of successful Republican candidates and politicians, and you will notice Every single one of them in modern history has inserted themselves into a specific culture war, and that's the reason they won. Glenn Youngkin, obviously it is the issue of CRT and the broader issue of education. That's what pushed him over the finish line. 2016, Donald Trump, his, significant culture war was immigration. He made his campaign basically all about it, more or less. Guess what? It was successful. Clearly, it worked. You look at someone like Ron DeSantis even. Now, obviously, he has to get reelected next year, but Ron DeSantis built his political identity and really his political popularity that he has now off of the issue of COVID, right? That was sort of his culture war. But it is very clear that when Republicans start to make waves and when Republicans actually insert themselves into a particular battle, we find specifically that they win. So I don't want to hear any more about, socialism or what have you. And let me also say, the commonality probably of 2016 Trump and Glenn Youngkin, which is that neither of them actually called their opponents socialists primarily. What did they call their opponents? What did Trump call Hillary and what did Glenn Youngkin call McAuliffe? Okay, it was actually sort of this line that they are establishment crooked politicians. You look at most of Glenn Youngkin's campaign ads, he's not running against, radical socialists going to take over Virginia. He's actually running against, hey, you've had this establishment in your government, for a lot of decades and it's not working. And, we're going to take Virginia back and basically serve the people.
For too long, we've been told there's only one way to do things in Richmond. The same politicians taking us in the wrong direction. I'm Glenn Youngkin. I'm not a politician. I spent 30 years building business and getting big things done.
Right, that sort of just generically populist message. You notice how that actually tends to actually just work better than the whole socialist line. But clearly, you kind of noticed this, right? Clearly, it is the case that the establishment Republican Party will not want any type of political candidate ultimately to run on an anti-establishment message, precisely because, in a way, if you're kind of running on the line that Youngkin ran off of, you're running on the line that Trump ran off of, which is that, you have this uniparty in the government, you have this establishment that has failed you, clearly that, in a way, indicts the establishment Republican Party in many ways. And so, the socialist line, on the other hand, is really more actually defending the establishment and saying, hey, keep things the way they are, don't let these radical socialists take power. So just, something to point out. It's kind of obvious why they want to drill home the socialist line. They want to kind of redefine what actually successful Republican candidates have been about. And, I think there's a lot of reasons, there's a lot of motives, but I'm here to say, stop it. This line really does not work. Now, if you're running against someone like Bernie Sanders or someone to the left of Bernie Sanders, I'll entertain the idea. But running against your generic neoliberal establishment politician, it is much more effective as we learn, A, to insert yourself into culture wars, but also, B, as we learned in 2016, as we learned last Tuesday, it is also more effective to call a crooked establishment neoliberal politician what they are, a crooked establishment neoliberal politician, than trying to say, hey, this person who's been in government for a while, actually, if you let them get reelected again, they're just going to become a radical socialist. Nobody believes that, but people don't like the leadership of establishment crooked politicians, so, use that. Now, what I will also say, and as I said I would talk about earlier, are the reasons why Glenn Youngkin won that are out of his control, but also equally, again, that the establishment Republican Party and these political consultants still clearly don't understand, which is the fact that obviously Glenn Youngkin didn't just win because of CRT, although it was a big issue. Glenn Youngkin also, and this is sort of out of his control, but he won just based on the state of the country, right? The country's not in a good place. The economy sucks. Inflation, this and that. Biden has a very abysmal approval rating. The Democrats nationally have very abysmal approval rating. And so obviously those are just kind of easy factors. And it's especially true in Virginia where, inflation, economy is very bad, right? These are obviously factors that are just going to naturally give Republican candidates sort of that midterm boost because Democrats are the incumbent party. So obviously, right, you can kind of visualize that. You can see why that is the case. But I will also say equally that Republicans don't understand that. They don't. Because if Republicans understood that, you would not see them voting for the infrastructure bill. Yet, you see them that they are. Yeah, that infrastructure bill that has like ridiculous built-in gas and mileage taxes and a bunch of like far left, pretty radical, pretty crazy, pretty terrible pork inserted into it, right? This infrastructure bill that nobody should be voting for, well, do Republicans not understand that especially what Tuesday showed them, right, is that essentially Biden the Democrats and the Democratic agenda and what they are doing in the government is not popular among the American people. It is not. Like, that's just clearly what you can see. If one deep blue state flipped and another deep blue state came very close to flipping, Pennsylvania, Republicans actually swept. Clearly, what that is telling you, right, Republican Party, is that essentially you are being given a mandate by public opinion to obstruct Biden's agenda. Okay, so with all that being said, with it being considered that Democrats are not popular right now, Biden is not popular right now, their agenda is not popular right now, clearly these elections are giving us a mandate. Why are Republicans voting for the infrastructure bill? There's literally no political reason that you have to cave, right? The people don't want you to cave. You have a mandate from the public to just obstruct and deny the Democrats what they want, and still you have Republicans voting for it, okay? And clearly what that goes to show you again is that they don't understand the mandate that they're being given to the people, which is quite simple. It's quite a simple mandate. We don't like the Democrats, therefore you have no obligation to go along with what the Democrats want, out of a sense that will make you more popular with the public. I think that mandate is pretty obvious. I think it's pretty easy to see. Republicans can obstruct everything from now to 2022 that Democrats want to get done, and they will have the public will have their back in the issue. But they don't get it. They don't get it. So what's probably going to happen is sooner or later they're going to let this infrastructure bill through, and it's going to pass, and it's going to be a disaster for the country, and Republicans will have enabled that. Now, still, dishonestly, they'll probably be able to say, hey, look what the Democrats did, but you voted for it. You voted for it, and quite frankly, a lot of these consequences probably not going to be easy to reverse. But it's just ridiculous. How do you win? How do you get a stunning upset, another very close to stunning upset in this election that's clearly like, oh, the public is on the Republican side, going to be a bad year for Democrats. Look at the energy. It's on our side. The support is on our side. And then literally a few days later just cave to the other party, even though clearly the American people have given your party the mandate. It's just sad to see. It's just sad to see, So, yeah, and it's very disappointing because obviously this energy that you're getting, it's very strong. It's very strong, and really this is probably the chance for us to get a lot of effective Republican politicians into power. And also in terms of the Republicans that are currently in power, it is kind of their chance. It is kind of their mandate to just be effective because they don't actually have to worry about approval ratings or any of those things. Those are all on our side. But of course, what you're going to get is caving, And what you're going to get in 2022, probably, obviously we have a few great America First candidates that we do plan on getting into power. But overall, you're probably going to see a lot more rhinos simply just elected into 2022. And then, we will have squandered yet another chance, yet another mandate from the American public to actually build an effective Republican Party. It's sad. It's sad. We hate to see it. We hate to see it. And you're gonna get more of these lines about socialism and probably more woke social justice. Well, we're not the real racist sort of type of rhetoric from them. So it's sad. And I will say it's also sad that in a way, liberal media and the liberal side understands Tuesday's election, specifically in Virginia, far greater than the conservatives do. Because look at the rhetoric that you are getting from the other side, okay? They're calling it a white lash, white backlash, white, whatever it is. And I will say, obviously Republicans are trying to back away from that. They're trying to say, no. But actually, that's true. That's actually true. That's exactly what Virginia was. And you know what? It's a good thing, quite frankly. I mean, because you have openly anti-white, right, racist against white people, demonizing white people, all of this rhetoric being pushed to children, being pushed in the workplace, what have you. Yes, it was a white backlash, and that is actually the primary support base. It was suburban white people. Suburban white people got Glenn Youngkin elected. No other group. I mean, obviously, there are other people in the electorate, but this is the primary demographic, and we know it to be the primary demographic that got this guy elected. And it was precisely because when you keep kicking a dog, okay, when you keep demonizing white people, it was actually kind of white. It was kind of white pilling. Funny pun. It was white pilling. Actually, is optimistic to see. Finally, people have had enough of this. Specifically, white people, the people who were affected, had enough of this, and finally stood up and said no. Obviously, liberals, obviously the people who want to push CRT and whatnot, they're going to oppose it. They're going to demonize white people. But it should be our stance that actually, is we ought to simply just be honest about this. Actually, you know, Glenn Youngkin did not win because he got record minority support, or he did not win because Americans fear socialism. No, he won because white people, specifically en masse, were sick and tired of getting demonized and pushed around, and racism towards them being openly acceptable. That's what happened. That's what happened in Virginia, you know. I know you're not supposed to say that. This is so, no, you know. If it were any other racial group, you would be fully expected and it would be celebrated. But, you know, white people vote in self-defense for once, by the way, for once. Finally, we start to see some suburban trends of suburban white people that are actually looking good. You know, obviously the left's going to go crazy, but at least the left understands it. Liberals obviously understand it. Now, it's not good news for them, but they understand it. They understand that's what happened. With the Republican Party, it's not the case, you know. But we see that with Glenn Youngkin, he kind of understood. He knew how to build that coalition. He was very effective at it. So we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully more conservatives actually understand, you know, that's probably going to be your primary voting base that, you know, that's winnable, that's realistic for the most part. Not the inner city black community because you did the First Step Act or whatever. Let me just say that. All right, guys. With that being said, hope you enjoyed. See you guys later. We'll probably do streams. We'll get back to streaming and stuff next week. It was a very busy week, okay? It was a very busy week. I know this video was very chaotic, but we love the high energy, don't we? All right. See you guys later. Alpha moves only. Peace.